All right, so I'm going to start getting to work on credit check. Let's go over the work README. So this is working on the LUN algorithm, best known for checking the validity of credit card numbers. So it verifies a number against its included check digit, which is usually appended to a partial account number to generate a full account number. The full account number must pass the following test. From the rightmost digit, moving left, double the value of every other digit. If the product of this doubling operation is greater than 9, 8, for example, 7 times 2 equals 14, then you sum the digit of those products. So 10 would be 1 plus 0 to 1, 14 would be 1 plus 4 to equal 5. Then we sum up all of the digits. If and only if the total modulo 10, means it's divisible by 10, is equal to 0, then the number is valid. So we have an example here. So our account is 5541808923795240. So two timesing every other digit from the back. So multiplying each of every other digit here by 2, getting all the ones that add up to over 9. So 1, 16, it goes to 7, 16 goes to 7, 14 goes to 5. And then we sum up all of the results to equal 70. 70 divided by 10 has a modulo of 0, so the account number is valid according to the algorithm. So the challenge itself is a little confusing. I know I've had trouble with this in the past, but I think, does anyone have any confusion about what it's actually requiring of us before we even get started? All right, so I'm going to open this up. We're going to do this in Python. Oh my God. Sorry about this. Not sure. VS Code's been weird. All right, so first let's write our unit tests. So again, this is unit test, which is a little bit easier to set up than Jest, thankfully. So I can just say import unit test up here. I will comment out all of these. And then we'll say class test credit check, which inherits, which we'll get into inheritance later. So unit test.test case. And then we can say def test valid numbers. And we can include multiple tests within one method if we want to. So we know that all of these methods are, all of these should be valid numbers. So we can say self.assert equal, check credit, passing it in this. Oh. So we're saying that this is equal to the number is valid, like so. And then I can just copy this line down here and just change the numbers up, like so. So this would test that it would detect all of my valid numbers. And then we can set up another method for invalid numbers. Test invalid numbers self. And I'm just going to keep on copying this line. There we go. And I'm just going to replace all of the number is valids with the number is invalid. And then replace all of these with numbers that shouldn't work. Oops, wrong one. There we go. All right. What questions do you have about how we set up these unit tests?
Hey Noah, it's Heather. So for the class test credit check, is it just convention to put that in camel case instead of snake case? Since
Yeah.
this is Python.
When we get to object-oriented programming in Python, classes, the convention is to use camel case instead of snake case for the names.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions about unit testing? All right. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to put something here just to make sure the credit check method returns something. So now I'm going to run my unit test just to make sure the spec file actually works. Uh-oh, no module named check credit. From check credit, import check. Oh.
Yeah, it's backwards.
Yep. The file is called credit check.
Yeah, that got me and my partner yesterday.
All right, so nothing happened here. So there should be something going on. So what am I missing?
Actually, the thing at the bottom of the spec file,
Yep.
You know what I'm trying to say.
Yep. It doesn't run if we don't do this.
No, can you explain line 17 and 18, what that's doing?
Mm-hmm. So the short answer is this is something that unit test implements to essentially say, we won't run this if you don't do that. The longer answer is that, and that is how unit test is built. But what this line's explicitly saying is that every file has something called dunder name, double underscore name. Like so. And so if I run this, I should get a print that says, here's the main. And the reason that happens is, let me see if I should be able to do something like this here. Let me see if this works the way I think it will. So when I run credit check spec from this file, like I explicitly run this file, this dunder name equals main, meaning that this is the main file that's being run. And when this file runs, it's also running my credit check.py file. And when it's run from here, this is the name it gives instead of main. So this is kind of a way of explicitly saying, when credit check spec.py is explicitly being run from the command line, do this. And not any other time.
Okay. I kind of get that. That'll work. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, cool. So now we need to get some pseudocode in here so that we can actually make this work. So let's look at the steps here again. So first step is we need to count backwards from the rightmost digit, which is the check digit, moving left, doubling the value of every other number. So our first real challenge here is we need to count backwards down our string, because we know we're going to be getting a string. And that's not something Python does normally, right? Python normally if we do a for in loop, Python will count from the beginning. So how do we count backwards?
Hey, no, real quick, can I ask one more question on the unit test file?
Yeah.
So I noticed that the methods aren't returning anything in there, but we get output, why is that?
So these self.assert equal methods, you mean?
Or the test valid, yeah, like there's no return statement yet we get, functional, things coming out.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly because it's just how the unit test framework is set up. So unit test says, all right, if you have these methods that are defined in this way within a class that does this unit test.test case and use our assert methods, we'll take care of the rest.
Oh, they're going to return it for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So unit test is an example of a framework specifically for testing. So it does a lot of stuff in the background that we don't necessarily understand. And we're going to be seeing this more often when we get into systems like Django and React and other things, is frameworks have a way of doing a lot of the work in the background for us.
Okay.
Good question. All right, so back to credit check. How do we count backwards? There's a few ways we could do this.
I reversed iterated with the range loop, or with reverse iterated using range in a loop. That's how I did it.
Okay, so you found a way to reverse iterate using a loop?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll ask you more about how you did that later. For now, I'm just going to say iterate backwards through the string. And then we need to say, all right, we need to check. We need to double the value of every other digit. So we need to find a way of checking whether or not this is every other digit, right? So how can we know whether this is the first digit or the second digit?
You could possibly go off of like if the index is odd or even.
Yeah, odd or even indexes. So we're starting at the last one, so presumably that would be 0. So we could say if index modulo 2 is 0, meaning it's an even number. So if that happens, we need to double the value. In order to double the value, what do we need to do to it? We ran into this problem with Armstrong numbers too, right?
Convert it back to an integer.
Yep. Convert character to string, to integer, and double. And then what do we do if that thing is greater than 9?
Combine the two digits or two props.
Yeah. So we need to add them together, which is its whole other thing, right? That's saying, okay, then we need to break up these digits and add them together. So that may involve some string conversion again, right? Or unless anyone found another method besides converting it to a string and then looping through it and adding the characters together by converting them back to integers.
I added the like the math.floor division by 10 to the modulo 10.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
So I guess if we're in Python, I added the number divided by 10 double slash to get like the floor of that division to the modulo of 10 from that same number.
Okay, so if it's so I want to make sure I'm getting this right. So if it's 10 or greater, we say add, so it'd be 10 / doubled integer and 10 modulo doubled integer.
Sorry, the flip the 10 on both sides of that, like double integer.
So doubled integer divided by 10 / 10, so it's rounded down, and then doubled integer modulo 10.
Yeah.
So if our number was 14, we would say, all right, 14 divided by 10 would be modulo. So 14 divided by 10 rounded down would be 1, and the modulo would be 4, and so that would give us 5, which is the same thing as 1 + 4 = 5. Yeah, that works. All right. So we do that to every other thing in the string. Oh, do we do anything if it's not that? If it's not every other one?
If it's not the every other index, you would just, I think I need to check the problem, but I think you just add it to your sum.
Yep, so we need to get the sum of all the digits.
Oh
So
yeah, we
maybe
didn't
before we
declare
start
that.
looping, we say define sum equals 0. And then we can say, oh, what the heck? Else add integer character, so converting it character to integer. Else convert character to integer. I don't want to combine. I want to be explicit here. Convert character to integer and add to sum. And we want to make sure we do that to our modulo 2 ones as well. Add to sum, like so. We get the sum of all the digits, and then we take the modulo 10 and see if it's equal to 0. So if sum modulo 10 is 0, return the number is valid. Else return the number is invalid. All right, so we define our sum equal to 0. We iterate backwards through the string. For each of those characters, if the modulo of the index divided by 2 is 0, we convert the character to integer and then double it. If that doubled integer is greater than 9, we add the doubled integer divided by 10 rounded down and the modulo of doubled integer and 10 together. That'll give us the sum of the digits. Then we add it to the sum. If it's not modulo, if the modulo of the index isn't 2, so every odd one, we convert the character to an integer and add it to the sum. Then we check, once it's done all of them, if the sum's modulo of 10 is 0, we return the number is valid, else return the number is invalid. Does this pseudocode make sense to everybody? What questions do you have about our plan? Okay, so our first step, sum equals 0. All right, so now how do we iterate backward through a string?
I guess you could use the range function.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
So I guess you could use the range function with its 3 arguments.
So could you explain what that means exactly?
Well, range takes in a start, a stop, and then
Yeah, so it says for 3 arguments, you give it start int, stop int, and step int. So you can say what you can specify where it starts in the range, where it stops in the range, and by how much it counts. So if we wanted to give this arguments to make it count backwards, what would our start, stop, and step be?
It'd be like 0 to -10, step back, -1.
So we want to start at 0.
would it be -2?
I think you want to start at string.length, right?
So you'd start at
String.
len of str -1, because the length of the string, if we want the last index, that's going to be the length of the string -1 because we start counting at 0. And then we're stopping at 0.
I think. Okay.
And then we're counting by -1. Is that right?
Is there like a reverse function that you could do where you just flip it and then go through it?
Good question.
Forward to
So
back?
let's see if Python has a reverse string function. So Python reverse string. So it says how to reverse a string in Python. There is no built-in function to reverse a string in Python. The fastest and easiest way is to use a slice that steps backwards -1. So using these colons here, it says : -1 should reverse it. So let's retry that out. So their example here says if we do text equals hello world : -1, that reverses it. All right. So that seems like it would be another way to do that. So we could say reversed str equals str : -1. Then we can just say we want to in the range of, let's get rid of all of this and just say len, already did that, of reverse string or string. They're the same length after all. This would be for, oh wait, right. So this won't give us the index number. This will give us the character. So, wait, no, we're using range, so it will give us the index. Sorry, brain fart. Okay, so we're iterating backwards through the string. Then we need to find the modulo of the index with 2. So we could say if, this would be index modulo 2 equals 0. We need to convert the character to an integer and then double it. So you could say doubled integer equals, I was trying to remember, it's not parseInt, so it would just be int reversed string index times 2. And then we need to check if it's greater than 9. So if doubled integer is greater than 9. So we need to add the doubled integer divided by 10 rounded down and the modulo. So we could say doubled integer equals, just reassign it, equals doubled integer //10 plus doubled integer modulo 10. So we're reassigning the doubled integer to be this, so we don't need to use a second variable and get confused. Then we could say right here, sum plus equals doubled integer. And then here, else. So if it's not every other if it's an odd index, we just say sum plus equals int reversed string index. So what questions do you have about this block of code that we just made?
I'm not tracking the double integer floor to 10 plus double integer modulo 10. Is that adding the digits together?
Yes. So this effectively doubles the adds the integers to the digits together. If we use an example like 14, so 14 //10 would equal 1 because that's 14 divided by 10 rounded down. And then 14 modulo 10 equals 4 because that's how much you get. Sorry, that's the remainder.
Got it.
And then
Cool.
If we add these two together, we get 5, which is the same as adding 1 plus 5 together.
That's clever. Thank you.
No problem.
I was looking at the logic a little bit more too. With that scenario, like that double integer divided by 10 would always be 1. So you don't even really have to do that part, since like the range of outcomes would only be like 10 to 18.
Yep. Yeah, we don't need to worry about any numbers larger than 18 because all the numbers are between 0 and 9. right. What other questions do you have about this this part of the solution?
Can you go back to your spec file? I messed up line 17 and 18. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So now we need to check if it's a valid number or not. So we check our modulo with 10. So if sum %10 equals 0, return the number is valid. Oops, forgot my colon. And the else return the number is invalid. And I know it would still work without the else line because that return would still stop it. I just like to be explicit about we have an if else going on because I want to say here are our two outcomes. If you want to forego having this else here, it would still work just fine. All right, so now I should be able to run my tests and see if they work. All right, we have one failure here. What does it say? So our invalid thing did not work. So it returned a valid number when it should have returned an invalid number. And I think I can see why right here. This one and this one are the same. So I think my problem here is that I accidentally passed it in a valid number. Are these the same?
All three are the same, it looks like. Number 1, number 2, and number 3 in both little areas are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this one, it says it shouldn't work.
No, I think the hundreds place digit is off, and the last ones on each block. The 7 is a 8 in one of them.
Yeah. And if I look here, it's the only one that's failing is actually this one. That's the only place it's saying, well, that's the only failure it's showing me. So if I change this to a random number, let's see if that still gives me something wrong. Okay, it's still saying that. All right, now it's saying that this one is invalid, but it's not showing me that the other ones are. So if I want to check, okay, is this doing what it's supposed to do? I could say print check. Well, let me do it another way. If I say, all right, I want to print some modulo 10, and I'm going to comment out everything below this one just to isolate it and figure out, okay, what is this working the way it's supposed to, or have I gotten just a bad number here? All right, so it gives me a modulo of 4. So that means that if our thing is working, this should be incorrect. This one should be correct, so I'm only going to test that one. So this one also didn't work. All right, so either the numbers were wrong or we are wrong. Yes?
We found out that it checks the numbers if you double them from the left rather than from the right.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
We found out that if you start from the leftmost and double every other, then it passes the test.
Mm-hmm. Start from the leftmost and did that. So I believe we reversed it and then did that. Excuse me. And so is that giving us the wrong numbers? Because reverse string should be in reverse. So let's make sure that worked. Reverse string. Here are reverse strings. And okay, the reverse, so it is reversing the string.
It tests for a not reverse string. Those are,
Sorry, which one does?
the numbers that were in the test spec
Mhm.
tested for like from the leftmost, not the rightmost for that part of the algorithm.
Oh, so
there was
is
like
that-
a conflict, Noah, within the instructions, in that like if you look at the working examples, it actually was doubling every number starting from the left to the right. But if you read the actual prompt, it says starting from the rightmost digit going left. So I think that's what the problem is that if you don't reverse the string, I think it's going to work.
All right, so I'm looking at the example they used here, which is the same as one of the ones in our spec file. So here's our original one. They have that. We start from the leftmost. Oh yeah, you're right, because it's not doing the 0. Ah, okay. I see what you're saying now. Okay, so in this case, I would definitely have to want to go back and check and make sure that, okay, are our examples correct, or did we do something wrong here? It sounds like we may have. So, all right, so this makes it, so problems like this make it tough because I'm like, okay, is our solution working then? I don't know, because now we don't have examples that I know for sure should be working or not working.
Couldn't we just get rid of the reverse, in this instance, get rid of reversing the string and then run it through the
So
normal?
that would pass our tests, but it wouldn't be solving the question that it's following the instructions we were given.
Yeah, it wouldn't actually be following the algorithm.
Exactly.
It would just, yeah.
So
Can you
Wait,
change
right?
yeah,
can you change
so
the modulo to 1 instead of 0 on the index?
yes, we could do so get all the odd numbers instead of the even numbers. Again, that would make the test pass, but it wouldn't be following the formula as written. So so what I'm going to say, I'm just going to make a call right now, is that I believe our solution here is solving the LUN algorithm the way it's supposed to. And I believe our tests are in the wrong here, and I don't want to spend too much time finding valid options. So what I'm going to say here is this is a case of, okay, not all of our tests are passing, but we know we solved the problem, so we're just going to be okay with that.
Do you have to remove the rightmost number? Because that's the sayings in the wiki link to that's like the check digit, and to not do anything to that number. You hit that link on top.
Oh, so you skipped that number at the back, you mean?
Yeah, the last number.
Oh,
Don't do anything to it.
So it would be okay. Okay, I get it now. So we would want to change this one to modulo 1, and well, module 2 does not equal 0, like so. Ah, so that fixes everything. So, okay, thank you. So the reason it wasn't working is because our instructions here don't have the LUN algorithm correctly. So that last digit doesn't count as one of as the last. Essentially, we want to exclude this, meaning we do want to count back every other odd index instead of every other even one. So that was our problem. Okay. So we'll update this README to be more explicit about don't include this last digit. And that'll be so that hopefully the next group won't run into this problem. Thank you all for this live debugging of our curriculum. All right, does everyone, any questions about what was going? Sorry, Emma?
Sorry. Is there a difference between not using the last digit and just starting from the first digit and doing every other, since credit card numbers are always this?
Yeah, so we could also make it so that we can make it even and just do reverse string -2. So that should give us everything except that last digit. And then we could have this be equal 0. And that should give us the same outcome, I believe. Let me find out. Okay, no, that didn't work. So either the reverse string method I've used didn't work, or I'm not entirely sure. But I see what you're saying.
It
I
might
think
have
what you're
failed.
saying would work. I just haven't, just changing those 2 lines wasn't enough to make it work.
I think it works like for the ones that end in 0, but the ones that end in 8, like if you have any non-zero digit in your test,
Yeah.
it's going to throw off like that final sum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we can't guarantee that we won't get numbers that aren't the required length of a credit card number.
Well, we could guarantee it by saying if it's not the required length, then give a message that says, you know, this is fake, you're in trouble or something, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. So it's 11, almost 11:30 now. All right, so I would like to take this opportunity, first off, to correct my spelling here, to kind of just go over some GitHub stuff earlier, just to, you know, kind of reiterate it. So right now, this is, I cloned down a repository that I forked off of the main one. So this is from Noah Heinrich /credit check instead of Mike Platoon /credit check. And I can just, you know, if I hit fork on something I've already done, I can just go to the fork I've already made. I cloned it down. And when I started, I created a new branch called Python solution. So if I do git branch right here, it'll show me I've got 2 branches, master and Python solution. So if I want to push my changes up, I would first have to stage them by doing git add dot. So now if I do git status, it'll show me changes to be committed. There's a new file called pycache, creditcheck.py, and creditcheckspec.py. I probably don't want to push pycache up to GitHub, right? So I'm going to create a git ignore. Actually, maybe that should be at our root of our directory instead of in the Python directory. Tom, do you know if that's going to make a difference?
Say it one more time.
Should the .gitignore be in the root directory of credit check, the credit check file, as opposed to the Python directory, or does it not make a difference?
I think it should be in the root directory.
All right, so I'm going to cd up. I'm going to touch and make a .gitignore.
But yeah, I don't know if it actually makes a difference.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure it ignores Python / dunder pycache here. I'm going to say Python / pycache. So I believe that should tell it to ignore this particular folder. So I'm going to add again. So I should say git status. So it says right here, we've created a new file called .gitignore. So I'm going to make my git commit message. I'll call this added working Python solution.
So that pycache is still going to be added in there because it's already added to the staging area.
Oh.
So you kind of have to git reset.
Yeah, thank you. So you need to add that git ignore before you git add, thank you. So I'll say git reset. So that unstaged everything. Now I can git add again. And now if I check my status, there we go. It added the .gitignore, but ignored this folder. So gitignore doesn't work if you make it after you add things to the staging area because they're already there. And what the gitignore does is it prevents you from adding things to the staging area at all. So now that I've done that, I'm going to make my commit message.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
You just did git reset. I see in that message it says use git restore. Can you use either one, or does it specifically?
So you could, yeah, I guess you could use git restore -- staged and then the file name to just remove that as opposed to resetting entirely. So you may want to use that if, I mean, I think Honestly, I feel like it would be the same. I guess it would be one command less than doing reset and then add again. So it's up to you if you want to unstage things by hand or just reset everything and add everything again.
No, the reset seems easier. I just didn't know if there was like a difference.
Yeah, good question. I don't know if there's any other differences besides the number of commands you're using at the end of the day. So I'm going to say,
Okay, thank you.
Added working Python solution, unit tests, and git ignore. Just being very explicit about everything I'm adding here. And so now I'm going to say git push origin. Oops, git push origin Python solution. So I'm pushing this particular branch up to this thing. And because I'm pushing it to mine, I can see right here, it says right here, git Python solution has recent pushes less than a minute ago. I can compare and pull request. And so it's got a chance here for me to say add working Python solution. You want to take a look up here because it says it can be merged, but the base repository is back from when I forked this during Kilo Platoon. I don't want to merge this into the Kilo Platoon repository. So I can, say, if I want this to be Noah Heinrich / credit check here. So this would allow me, this would be making sure, this would allow me to merge it into my repository instead of somebody else's repository. So you can choose where it's being merged to if you want. So I'm going to create my pull request. And typically when you're working on a team, once you've created a pull request, anyone else who has access to this repo would be able to see it and manage the merge. So when you're working on a group, it's good practice to say, hey, I just made a pull request. Do you mind checking it over before we merge it? So that way someone else can check your work and make sure there's nothing wrong with it before they hit this big green button here to merge it. It says right here, there's no conflicts. I don't need to solve a merge conflict or anything. So if I hit merge request, right, like so, confirm merge. So now if I check my code, here's my .git ignore, and it shows my pull request message shows up everywhere that it's applicable to. So added working Python solution, added working Python solution here. My Python solution branch is still up there, but it's the same as my master branch at this point because I merged them together. So what questions do you have about what I've done so far with Git?
So now that you've merged it onto your master branch, for us specifically, we would still need to put in a pull request to put it into my Platoon.
Yeah, so for submitting your challenges, you could tell it to, essentially you can make a pull request to Mike Platoon instead of your master one. And then it won't be merged. And so that way we can look at it. Or you could just tell it to merge like I did for your personal branch. But then we won't get this, we won't necessarily get the message. We would have to check the pull, we wouldn't be able to see the pull request. You're right. So you'd want to merge into Mike Platoon, not your own personal one. So now that I'm back here, if I go to my master branch, so I do git status here. So it says my branch is up to date with origin master. But I can see right here that that actually isn't true. So if I want to make sure that my master branch is the same as what's up on GitHub, I can do a pull by saying git pull origin master. And what git pull does, it's the opposite of push. I'm pulling the code from the master branch up here down onto my personal machine and merging them together. So that way, my master branch on GitHub and my master branch down here look exactly the same now. So I don't have any discrepancy between the two of them. And you'll be doing a lot of Git pulling as well during when you work on group projects, because someone will say, hey, I just merged up to master, which means that your master is no longer up to date. So you would switch to master and do a Git pull so that your master branch is the same as everybody else's. And now that that's done, I can safely delete my other branch. So it's a git branch -d Python solution. And that deletes the branch. So that's that'll often be your gradual workflow after Code Platoon, is you'll make a pull request, you'll push to your branch, make a pull request, merge it, or get someone else to merge it for you. And once it's merged successfully, then you can pull it down to your master branch on your personal machine, and then delete the branch you were working on earlier, if you don't need it anymore. So kind of following this pattern here, if I wanted to do the same thing on my JavaScript one, I'd probably check out a new branch called JS Solution, entirely for this, entirely for working on JavaScript. And then I could do everything I just did after I solved the JS one, and then push it, make a pull request, merge it, and do it all over again. What other questions do you have about Git and GitHub?
When we're working in the combine space, is there anything, like, do we need to put people's names to give people credit, or like how are we going to standardize whose repos are getting pushed, or if that makes
you don't
sense?
need to standardize whose repos you're pushing to. If you want to make sure that you're explicit about who is your partner, you could always call the name of your branch, like the name of your branch, so on and so on's solution. Or make sure you mention it in your pull request message is another way of doing that.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if you could like tag someone or tag other GitHub creators.
It might be possible to do that when you're in that thing that allows you to add other comments to tag other people. Excuse me. I believe it is. So if you when it said before I created the pull request, there's a space for messages. So I think from there you could tag other people. All right. Any other questions about Git and GitHub? Okay. In that case, I would also like to open up this time. If anyone has any questions about Python and JavaScript, all the things we went over this week. Kind of a quick reminder. So the things we did go over this week, we went over the basics of JavaScript and the basics of Python. We went into unit testing in both of these languages. We also covered pseudo coding. And let's see here. Is there anything else I'm missing? Git and GitHub, pair programming.
I do have a question about the indexing, like in the for loops and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you just have to memorize which ones are going to be the index and which ones are going to be, like if you're iterating through a dictionary using a key, like the key isn't the index, it's actually like the key. So sometimes I'm coding it, I expect it to be like an index, and then I'm like, oh man, it's not. Is there a rule of thumb for figuring out?
Let me start something and make sure I'm on the same page as you right now. So I'm gonna we did this in Python. So we could call it indexing.py. There we go. There we go. All right, so if I said, user equals name is Noah, birth date is June 6th. So you're saying if I was looping through all of the keys here, would I have to memorize all of these names, or is there a way to check?
No, when you're utilizing and iterating programming structure, like a for loop or something.
So
I noticed sometimes I equals just the index, and sometimes I could equal like name or birthday, I think.
Yeah. So it's kind of different between coding languages and data structures. So in Python, when I loop through for I and user, that gives me the key for all of these.
Mm-hmm.
But if I did users and have this be an array, so Noah, Tom, and John, and then said print I and users, that'll give me the values instead of the indexes. So in Python, a for loop has different rules for a dictionary and for an array when it comes to for loops.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was getting caught up on.
Mm-hmm.
Just didn't know if there was a difference.
Yeah. Okay. So which is why when we were doing credit check, we were using range len of users or len of that, because that'll give us the index numbers as opposed to the values.
Okay. So it can kind of change depending on what you're iterating through and whatnot. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, anyone? Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at this weekend's assignments, and I'm praying to God that these are for the whole weekend and not for just today. So it looks like there's a lot to do. If I'm feeling real shaky on GitHub and npm installs and those kinds of things and the testing, is it worthwhile for me to like spend more time on that at the expense of getting through everything? Or is it really important that I do as much JavaScript and Python as possible and the other stuff will just come?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So first off, yes, these are due through the entire weekend. So you don't have to get them all done by the end of the day today. So don't worry about that. If you run into problems with like npm install and stuff like that, my personal suggestion would be, if it's just holding you up for one challenge, I would say, okay, skip that and come back to it later. If it's like preventing you from doing all of the challenges, then yeah, you want to make sure you figure that out as soon as possible so that it doesn't trip you up even more even later. But in general, I would say I would err on the side of touching everything at least a little bit, even if you don't finish all of them, because a lot of these will expose you to a lot of problems about data structures and stuff like that, which are going to be vital later. But again, if you don't finish all of them, that's fine. We're not going to worry about it. For balanced brackets in particular, is kind of fiendish. So if you get stuck on that one, that's fine. It's meant to be like a super challenge. Does that answer your question, or am I missing something?
No, yeah, that's good. Thank you. I just, there's a lot of the stuff outside of the JavaScript and Python itself. I feel like I'm doing it probably wrong every single time, and doesn't seem to be at some point it will catch up to me, but right now it doesn't feel like it's holding me back. I'm still able to do the coding. Mm-hmm. And so I just am wondering if it's better to sort that out now or wait till it, hurts me and then I'll learn the hard way.
Yeah. And this could also be this afternoon is also a great chance to, talk to me or Tom or one of the TAs and really kind of, nip that in the bud. That's the expression I'm thinking of. Great. What other questions do you have on Python, JavaScript, Git, anything else we covered this week? Excuse me. Okay, well, in that case, I will let you all go. So take a lunch break.
Before we
Oh.
take a lunch break, Rod wants to talk
Oh,
to
never
the
mind.
class.